What do you get when a London-raised American South African and a New York-raised Moroccan
meet on the interwebs and become instant soul sisters? One of them, an Ayurvedic practitioner and transformation coach, and the other, a Conspire breathwork coach and Reiki master teacher. Both obsessed with wellness, family, entrepreneurship, relationships, and the magic of human expansion and growth. You get a whole convo.
We truly believe that with an open heart, focused mind, and energy receptive to the possibilities, your wellness journey can guide you to a life that exceeds your wildest dreams.
Welcome to our podcast. We're Ella and Iman, and we are so happy you're here. Come vibe with us as we explore the wholeness of being through the lens of wellness.
Welcome to A Whole Convo with Ella and Iman. Hi, Iman. How are you doing?
I'm good, Ella. How are you?
I'm good and excited.
I know you are. I'm actually super excited for today's episode. Our listeners are going to be in for a treat because we're going to talk about breathing like our life depends on it.
OMG. I'm just hearing music to my ears, Iman. Music to my ears. And the reason I'm so excited is because I need to take a breath. You see how that excitement gets me like, oh my goodness, and I'm all
Yeah.
I need to take a breath because I could talk about this forever and ever and ever.
I know.
And I need to rein that in and focus and concentrate that energy so that I can share with you in my highest excitement, but in a way that is most helpful and is most grounded.
Yeah, so let's bring more of the kapha in and we'll let a little of the pitta go. Even though we want to scream.
Or more of the oxygen down all the way to the soles of my feet, feeling that connection to the floor. So we've got the Ayurveda covered, we've got the breath covered. It's a beautiful thing. So I want to kick off by saying breathe like your life depends on it because it does. Because it does. It's so easy for us to forget this because it happens naturally. You may have heard me say this before, and I will continue to say it. Just because we breathe as part of our autonomic nervous system does not equate to breathing well. It does not equate to having the best function mentally, emotionally, physically, and on a spiritual, human, expanded level that our breath is designed to offer us and is designed for. So, in that part, I want to start with how the language around breath is in many different languages. So, right from
Well, before you go into that, let me just set a context here.
okay,
In relation to breath and breath work, there's so many different practitioners and coaches, and there's so many different types. What is the correct term for the kind of breath work that you teach, love?
Okay, so I want to, before I get into that bit, make the distinction between conscious breathing and breath work. And for me, I make this distinction because of the different elements that come into play in the different disciplines. So any type of breathing where we change deliberately the way that we are breathing is conscious breathing. So if even just me saying, I'm going to take a breath, that
Yeah.
is me engaging in conscious breathing because I've paused and I've changed the way that I'm breathing to collect
Okay.
myself, to feel more grounded, to feel more connected and present in this moment. And conscious breathing for me involves all the type of breathing when we talk about box breathing, when we talk about 4-7-8 breathing, when we talk about the different types of alternate nostril breathing, pranayama, different types of kriyas, they are all types of conscious breathing where we are working with the life force for a particular effect and particular outcome. And my distinction is when we're looking at breath work, we're looking at consciously breathing in ways that specifically create integration, emotionally, physically, mentally, spiritually. So we're using our breath to bring in a whole human experience. And this is something
Mm.
where we connect a lot with in terms of how we approach our work, and looking at all aspects of our experience and looking at how uh, if we're having challenges in a relationship, for example, that affects us emotionally, how that affects us in the things that we think about ourselves and the other person, in the way that that can impact and affect our physical health, and in the way that that can impact and affect our perception of ourselves, our interaction spiritually, on all of the levels of our human experience. So when I'm looking at breath work, the work that I do as a Conspire coach,
Mm.
using the word conspire from its ancient Latin roots, which means to come together and breathe. So that's where the word conspire comes
Love
from in
that.
my work. So we're coming together to breathe. We're bringing all parts of us together and breathing in that awareness to create change in any aspect, in all aspects, in a focused aspect of our lives. So, as a Conspire Breathwork coach, that is the work that I do. And that involves talking and understanding, that involves making conscious decisions about how we move forward. It involves healing and integrating the past. It involves breathing life into the things that we desire. And I've the reason I use it, the word conspire, is that bringing together, coming together to breathe. And this type of breath work has been an evolution of the things that I've studied, an evolution of my personal experience and practice in my life, and then bringing that into practice with my clients. So yeah,
I
that's
love that. And I know we mentioned a little bit about the distinctions between conscious breathing and breath work in another episode. And I love the way you always explain it, but I'm glad we gave some clarity in this context because I think one of the most significant aspects of breathing is that it's default. It is, like you said, something that is involuntary and that we do just by being us, just like by being a human being. So it is something that I think is underrated. I
mm-hmm.
think it is something that is not often, talked about, but more importantly, not understood. And so this is why I'm super excited for this episode. So take us through it, Ella.
So that idea that it is involuntary, because it is part of our autonomic nervous system, it's a function that's required to keep us alive. And our life, and I've said this before, and this is one of my, it just is such a clarifying thought. Our life is characterized as the space between our first and our last breaths.
Hmm.
No breath, no life.
Period.
Before we start taking our first breath, it was we're not here, we're not experiencing life, we're supported through the umbilical cord and our mother is breathing for us. But when we're actually born into this world, that's when our life begins. Oh, that's a whole convo, I've realized as I
I
what
would literally, I just got chills as you said, that's when our life begins. I'm like, but does it? That's a whole other
that's
conversation.
a whole convo. Our life in this physical earth as
Yeah,
we
right.
know it, okay,
In
for
this
clarity.
dimension, in this plane of field, in the
Yeah.
moment.
Yeah, where we can be dependent on ourselves to breathe. Oh, let's just keep it simple. Let's just keep it there.
Right, right.
So it's characterized from our first breath, and everything in between, and the breaths in between are what make up our life
Why is that
until
so
that
deep? God, I'm getting just hearing you say that is just like it's so deep. All the breaths in between in that interim. Oh my goodness.
No, and it's like again, and we look at the language because we talk about things expiring, and that means the end of life. Expire, spire meaning to breathe when we look at the root words.
Yep.
So, there's all this in our language. It's so ingrained into the way that we speak and the way that we understand. And so too in our physical experience. It's so just a part of us that we don't have to take much care of it
Right.
until we understand that when we do, everything changes, right? So,
Love that.
our life depends on it, and yet we don't realize the difference that we have when we start to consciously engage with it, when we start to consciously look at it. So if we, and there's so many levels on which this works. If we look at this from a biological perspective, and again, I'm going to keep this really, really simple. The quality of our breathing affects the uptake of so many things in the energy production of our body, as well as the what's the word I'm looking for? Elimination part of our body is
Mm.
so determined by the quality of our breath. So we're breathing, not necessarily paying attention to it. All of the things that are happening in our body that rely on our breathing will continue to happen, but the quality of that experience will be directly impacted by the quality of our breathing.
Yeah.
So, for example, when we're looking at how we create energy in our body, our breathing is part of respiration, which creates ATP, which then goes on to create the energy and how we produce it in our bodies, and the levels of ATP, and there's sustained, how am I trying to say, like how sustained that ATP
Right.
production is, and consistent. So if our breathing is compromised at the beginning stages of that, because then it's how much oxygen we're getting through that respiration to complete that cycle. When it's compromised, that will be compromised at the end result and how much energy we
Sure.
experience, right? And then the converse, when we are eliminating, whether that's waste elimination through our digestive system, how well the mechanism of breathing is happening, how well our diaphragm is engaged or not, affects that abdominal cavity and what's going on in there.
Right. And the
How
organs in there.
exactly, and how that waste moves through us, as well as the impact it has on lymphatic drainage. So yes, I'm breathing, everything's fine. But if I elevate my quality of breathing, if I address and do it with more intention and with more awareness, then how I feel, how much energy I have, how well my body can function, and as a result, as well as how well I get rid of the waste that my body no longer needs, will be directly impacted by a breath. So if we go back to breathe like your life depends on it, it does in that biological sense. And even
Absolutely.
though, even though we can get by, look, don't get me wrong, we can get by without looking at our breath, without doing anything to it, we can get by. But who wants to get by, Iman, when
Yeah.
we have the potential through very, very simple practices
If
to
it's
elevate?
available to us, that'll elevate us. I mean, there's no question.
Yeah, exactly. And the knock-on effect that that has to every aspect of our lives. So it's we can look at it from that basic function: energy production, waste elimination. And
Now,
then,
I thought of a question as you were
okay,
speaking, if I can just jump in.
please, please.
I don't want to mess up your train of thought if you're like in a flow. But as you're speaking, because we did talk about in the other episode when we were speaking about the power and the impact of ancient medicine and like just reconnecting with nature and reconnecting back to our ancient roots. Are you familiar or can you share what is the ancient history of breath? Like, as you're speaking, I'm thinking, well, I bet some listeners or some people will be like, well, I don't think people were doing breath work back then, but
100%
I
they were.
I
Well,
know.
conscious
This is why
breathing.
I want you to
This
enlighten us.
this is where I'd say that they were doing conscious breathing 100%. 100%. You look
Of
at
course.
Ayurveda,
Of
you know about
course.
it. You looked at yoga, you know about it. You look to traditional Chinese medicine, there are breath practices in it. So it has different names in each of those disciplines. We talk about it as prana through the more Indian roots expressed as prana. When we
Yeah.
look at it in the traditional Chinese medicine sense, it's qi. When we
Yeah.
look at it through Japanese roots, it's ki. Now, I would say I don't have the language for it from other ancient traditions, only because it hasn't been recorded. Doesn't mean it wasn't existing. It
Of
doesn't mean it
course.
wasn't a part of it. But there is that innate understanding that, and all the words relating to our breath talk about it in relation to the life force, and they talk about it in the understanding and the awareness that when we work with the life force, we can alter our experience.
Mm.
By changing how the life force is channeled through us,
Was.
we will create different outcomes. So, conscious breathing is inextricably linked with every healing practice, with every healing understanding, into the language, into our every part of us knows that when we experience life as a human being, and it's a life defining or a big peak experience, our breath will be impacted in some
Changes.
way.
Yeah,
You know,
totally.
it took my breath away.
Yeah.
I was able to finally exhale. I
Yes.
was able to, I had space to breathe. It's so interwoven into our understanding of ourselves as human beings, and
Mm.
yet it's lost the space of and recognition of how important it is in our
A
modern way
hundred
of living.
percent. 100%. Love that.
So, do you know what, even if we go to religious texts, and we were talking about religion as being a man-made distraction in
Or that.
was Freudian, wasn't it? um
If you say so.
that was not where I was going with that, but as a man-made distraction, right?
Yeah,
As an externalization of our
of course.
experience. And even within that, so many religious texts refer to the breath of God and how things are brought to life with the spirit of the breath and moving through us and moving through our bodies. So
Yeah.
it's been around forever, yes, because as human beings, we don't live or we don't survive without it. And I'm just so excited about reminding people who are watching, reminding people who are listening that this understanding and this awareness and this even willingness to notice and create awareness of your breath can massively change every single aspect of your life and every single experience that you have, elevating it, expanding it, making it brighter, bringing more color, bringing more definition
Right.
to all of the things. So I'm going to leave that bit there. Yes, we've mentioned the scientific ways that breath impacts our physical being and our physical experience, and to take it into a deeper understanding of what that looks like. So we've just looked at it in terms of function when we're
Right.
talking about it. Now, when we understand that our life is characterized as the space between our first and our last breaths, this is where breath starts to take on the dimension and deeper impact into how we experience life.
Mm.
Because every single thing, our breath is the only companion that we carry with us. And what that means is through the highs, through the lows, through the challenges, the traumas, our breath is with us. And it will be impacted by the way that life is impacting us.
Right.
And this is an important aspect of it, because when we're looking at the quality of our breath, we have to understand that when life challenges us, when life feels difficult, the the way that that is registered in our body will be through our breath, and we will hold on to those fluctuations, we'll hold on to the impact of life, we'll hold on to the impact of challenge very subtly through our breath, and that begins to affect the quality of the way we breathe. And there's more and more exploration and understanding of how our body is a storing place of our life experience. So,
Mm.
people like Basil van der Kolk, in his book The Body Keeps the Score, he's this psychiatrist who talks about, he's a trauma specialist, and he talks about how he began to understand that we were looking at trauma from a mental perspective.
Yeah, up here.
Yeah, and forgetting that trauma lives in our body. If we don't have that awareness and we don't have that understanding and take that whole approach, we're
Exactly.
missing how well we can address trauma, how well we can address challenges in our lives, how well we can create healing from the mental and emotional perspective into the physical manifestations that that creates. And breath is the thread that links that. So our
Makes
body
so much
mind,
sense.
yeah, so our body mind connection is the breath. The way that we think affects the way that we breathe. And conversely, if we change the way that we breathe, we can affect the way that we think. So there's all this is like the deeper embedding of how the breath affects our lives. It's like it's so fundamental physically, and then it goes deeper. And then we look at how emotions then begin to show up in our breath, and these repeated patterns can get locked and kind of knotted up, all intertwined. And the best way to unravel them is back through the breath, back through the experience of feeling, back through the experience of untangling them, to open them up, to create more space, to create more life force moving, to create more freedom in our lives. And this is where we start to move into the ideas of where breath work was really taken hold of, like by thinkers like Stanislav Grof. There were people like Leonard Orr who were looking at how our unconscious mind could be accessed through breath work, and how we then, by breathing in specific ways with the intention of accessing this like suppressed and repressed material, we can
Hmm.
start cleaning up our experience. So body mind connection, breath, life force connection, physical, emotional, mental, energetic, all of the things.
All of the things. Oh, I am so obsessed with how passionate you are about it and how well informed and how deeply ingrained you've been in the knowledge and the wisdom, because I can tell. And even in doing that, session with you, we did a group session a while back online, and then we did an in person, just your way of embodying what breath amplifies in our life. I've never seen anything like it. And I'm not saying this because I love you and you're my girl. You, seriously, you are so embodied and so rooted in the conscious awareness of the impact breath has. And so I would love to know what, for anyone listening who's fairly new, because my experience with conscious breathing is heavily rooted in Ayurveda and pranayama and a little bit of yoga and in that aspect. But for anyone listening who maybe has heard of breath work, and now is getting a little bit more deeper knowledge in it because you've given us some pretty incredible like context on what the impact is from a functional aspect and from a mental, emotional, and energetic aspect. What would the starting point for someone look like? Or what would a session look like? What does it look like for someone who would say now a conscious thought would be, I want to explore what breath work would be for me, would do for me.
Okay, so I will break this up, and I'll say maybe looking at as a session as a whole convo in itself.
Totally.
So the most important starting place for anybody is to create an awareness of how you are breathing. And I say
Now,
this,
right,
yeah, like in this moment, notice
right.
yourself anytime you're out and about and you
True, because
remember.
it's something we're not even aware of or think about, right?
That's like one of the homeworks that I will give someone when they first start out, because you will be mind blown at how many times how much you're holding your breath during the day, how much your breath may feel restricted, how much tension you may be holding in your body, so it makes it difficult to breathe. Certain things that will stimulate the way that you change your breathing. So, in creating that awareness, you can actually start to understand in your own personal experience how significant your breath is, and how much there may be that altered quality and that diminishment of capacity to breathe. And because these things, we pick up these alterations to our breathing over such a long period of our time in
Yeah,
our lives. And
right.
it's
It becomes like a pattern and like a part of our
exactly,
being, a habit and a default that we're not even aware of.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. And it's so incremental. It happens just so ever so slightly that it's not going to feel like a big deal in that
Yeah.
moment. But the compounding impact of it is significant. So just bringing that awareness, bringing that presence, because the other thing that happens is when you start becoming aware of your breath, you are by default becoming more present in your life.
Hmm.
When you're focused on your breath, your mind can't be somewhere else. So that introduces the support of being more present in your own experience. And I would say that is the most delicious and most perfect place to
It
start.
sounds delicious. I mean, the fact that awareness is the first step makes so much sense. It should be always the first step in our life, right? Because if we're not first aware, then there's nothing that we can actually take, action on in order to improve whatever present state we're in. Plus, I do agree with you that even taking that step of awareness forces us to be so present. And I think as far as like wellness goes and wholeness goes, that is something that is often not talked about when it comes to vitality. Like you know how people talk about like supplements and eating and nutrition, all those things for sure. Can you imagine if like presence was like a prescription? How about you take 2 doses of presence a day? Like
Well, Iman,
what it would do for us.
in my world, it kind of is, that like let's breathe and be present because the
Right.
the thing is, and I love that you've mentioned that because a lot of our view of wellness is how do I fix myself? How do I get on, move through this thing so that I can get on to the next thing? And it perpetuates the disconnection. Because if I feel better by taking supplements, and supplements are great. I love a supplement. But if I
Yeah.
feel better by taking a supplement, then I might not necessarily have to be paying attention to things that may contribute to the dysfunction in the first place or the lack of ease that I may feel. So presence, awareness of your breath is a great place to start. And then, the second one is like super simple. Slow down. You and take some conscious breaths. And that can look as simple as just placing your hands on your lower abdomen so you have that as a point of reference and
Hmm.
then breathing. Let's do it now. Place your hands on your lower abdomen
Yeah. Have it.
and then feel your feet, your soles of your feet connecting with whatever surface you're on,
Yeah.
and then be aware of your seat.
Check my booty.
Yes.
I'm aware of that.
And then and we love that. And then slow down your breathing. And that's whatever feels more connected and slower for you. And then as you breathe in and out of your nose, watch that breath travel towards the hands on your abdomen, towards your
Mhm.
seat.
Is
And
there a
then
right or wrong way to exhale? Like, is your diaphragm supposed to be going up or down?
when you inhale, your diaphragm distends into the abdominal cavity. When you exhale, it retracts. So, is there a wrong way to exhale? Now, that's a loaded question.
Right,
I'm just going to say the simple answer is no. When we are breathing in the day-to-day life, we're breathing in and out of our nose. That's the optimal way to breathe for many reasons. The filtration that happens through the nasal cavity, the change in temperature that instills in us, at rest, breathing in and out of our nose is the perfect way. Now, and I say the simplest thing is there isn't a wrong way to do it. Can we improve the way that we inhale and exhale? Absolutely. Can
right,
we look at it in an individual person and optimize it? Absolutely. But the most important thing is we're not trying to make our current state wrong. We
right.
can work with it. It can be improved, but we don't want to give ourselves this complex. I'm doing it right or I'm doing it wrong. I'm doing it
That's
the
why I
way I'm
asked
doing
that
it.
question because I knew you were going to give us that answer because that is so important, I think, in wellness and in health. It is so often thought that there's something wrong. This is bad. This is wrong. I need to fix versus appreciating what's the current state, acknowledging it, being aware, and then asking, how do I want to elevate? How do I want to improve?
100%, 100%. And I don't know if you said appreciating the current state. I don't know if you mentioned accepting it, but
I, I
acceptance
didn't, but absolutely agree.
is a huge
Same.
part of that. And it is true because with the rise of talking about conscious breathing, there has been some demonization about how people breathe, and this is mouth breathing. You are, oh my gosh. Breathing in and out of the nose is the best way at rest. And yet, if you're a mouth breather, there's nothing wrong. You can work with that. Don't make yourself feel bad, because I think there's a lot of places where it's like, that's the worst thing you could do. Oh my God. There, there, there. And it's like,
Yeah.
yeah, no, I don't
Yeah,
subscribe
the
to
whole
that.
diminishing way of talking about something is definitely not my stilo. And I always get so, yeah, there's a way to share a concept and a way of bettering our health. That's a whole other conversation, though, I think, for sure, especially in our industry and in our field of health and wellness.
No, 100%. So it's that reminder that yes, everything is perfect, and can it be better? 100%. And that doesn't mean that we have to make ourselves feel bad for where we're at, because there's a million reasons why we got there. So
Yeah.
being with that awareness, slowing down and taking that moment to breathe consciously, because you just take 3 breaths with your hands on your abdomen, focusing and following your breath, things start to change in your nervous system. You start to bring more presence. You start to move out of those stressed feeling states. And I think for me, that's the perfect place to leave it. To just
Yeah.
remember you have that power in your breath, and your life does depend on it.
Yeah,
And
totally. Love that. Oh, this was so amazing, so informative and so helpful. And I love the way you simplify it, wrapped in such depth as well. Like the simplicity and depth of understanding our breath, I think is just perfection. So thank you for that, Ella.
thank you for giving me the space to kind of get in touch, because
I just want to scream.
oh
Ah,
my goodness. Oh my
love it. So
goodness.
I hope that our listeners can, like you said, just be more aware of their breath and take it from there.
But I'll
I
just take the just out of it, not just be more aware. Really be more aware. Give yourself that love. Give yourself that and give yourself that time. But I'm going to cut myself off. I'm cutting myself off. We're done here. Because I will just keep going otherwise, Iman. So thank you so much for joining us,
Thank
listening
you
in.
so much, everyone, for listening to A Whole Convo with Ella and Iman. We can't wait for the next episode.
100%. Until next time.
That is a wrap on this week's convo. We had a blast talking to you.
Thank you for sharing your time, hearts, and minds with us.
We hope this episode left you thinking, feeling, and maybe even breathing a little deeper. If it moved something in you, please share it, text it to a friend, or just sit with it.
Remember, the power of change can start with the simplest convo.
And if you have any comments or thoughts you'd like to share with us, please feel free to do so. We'd love to connect with you. Don't forget to subscribe to our show so you never miss a moment of the magic. And if you're curious about any of our services and offerings, check out the show notes for all the links and goodies. We're so grateful you're on this journey with us. Until next time,
Stay rooted, stay whole.